Hello, everyone. My name is Connor Agers, and today I want to talk about understanding toxic masculinity with the perspective of mental health and relationships. So, my research question today is: what is toxic masculinity, and how does it affect relationships and the mental health of individuals? My hypothesis is that based on the definition of toxic masculinity, this will heavily impact both relationships and the mental health of individuals that meet criteria for toxic masculinity. Going back into prior research, we have the origins, which can be found all the way back to 1980s by R.W. Connell. His perception of it was called hegemonic masculinity, and this is basically unequal gender relations between men and women based on historical and society-wide social settings, and there's just this huge imbalance between masculinity and femininity. Um, this was later redefined in 2005 to focus more on the hierarchy and the structure behind the power differentials. And then it was popularized in 2016 by late feminist um, supporters and has continued to grow today until now. We have entered a time where it is a commonly used word with not a lot of understanding as to where it actually came from. Um, so, a lot of theories on toxic masculinity stems back to traditional masculinity, which is the heteronormative man makes the money and brings it home to the wife. Really traditional style um, views. And so then we get into the religious and political theories behind toxic masculinity, which go back to, um, especially in American society, there being men set as leaders and women not being given the right to have those leadership roles. And then even further back, religious impacts and how those were also cases where men were put in positions of power while women were not. Um, some causes behind why it's believed that there is toxic masculinity would be the authoritarian and patriarchal father figures, as well as socialization of it as a whole. Um, Results of research has proven that in the past there has been a positive association with toxic masculinity and the negative outlook on mental health, and some issues with this research include that there's not really a strong definition as to what masculinity is, since so many different cultures have their own interpretations of what masculinity is. Um, there's the probability for bias, which I will get more into in a later slide, as well as just a lack of research, since toxic masculinity as a whole is considered a newer topic. All right, so what is toxic masculinity? Well, based off of all of the research that I've been doing, there's been a few common themes that I wanted to go over. There's domination, which means wanting to have power over women, wanting to not let women have any control. Anti feminism, which dates to people not wanting women to have equal rights and wanting that 1920 style society. Um, Patriarchal, they tend to support a society that's run by men and not by women. And finally, I wrote abusive and harmful because after reading all of this, it does seem that there is a tendency for intimate partner violence with those that exhibit all these traits of toxic masculinity. All right. So the next conversation that we need to have is, what are the limitations? And so the definition does need some work, and so that is something that I wanted to find more information on. Um, the cultural differences behind masculinity can greatly differ, and so I tried my best to find as many resources as I can from different cultures, but there are going to be still some differences. Um, a lot of this research is based on self reported data, and so obviously there comes to the concern of bias and how that could influence the results with individuals self reporting on their own behavior rather than being studied. And so that is some of the limitations that I wanted to discuss. All right. So, my research method that I wanted to choose was based on the previous research, which is a survey, and it is quantitative. So, it'll be the self reported scales once again, because there's not a whole lot of other ways to engage in this research as of right now. I was looking for other studies that might have done something different, but this was the best that I could find. And then I also wanted to take a focus on men that were 18 and older. So, like, there isn't really a specific focus on age requirement as much as there is just being a man, um, or identifying as a man. And so, with that being said, I wanted to go over the scales that I was going to be using. So, the scales that I'm planning on using for this research would be the traditional masculinity to femininity scale, which looks over what gender roles they value, and can just get a better idea as to where they stand in terms of traditional to more new styles of gender roles. Attitude towards women scale. So, obviously, if they have a poor attitude towards women, then they are much more likely to be exhibiting the toxic masculinity traits than if they were to look at women as equal. And then for my hypothesis, I wanted to include the relationship assessment scale. So this will go over how they view relationships and what they think is important in relationships, and then the MHSAS, which is the mental health seeking attitude scale. And this will go over how they personally feel about seeking mental health help when needed. And so that'll cover my hypothesis is mental health aspect. So for my data analysis, I'm planning on using a statistical analysis, and the type of statistical analysis is the simple linear regression formula. And I believe that my benefits to the prior research would be having a refined definition, especially since there has been a lot of concerns over what the definition truly is. Um, Updated research on the topic, especially since a lot of the research that has been done hasn't been done in a while, and a lot changes, especially in just a few years. And so I wanted to include some more up to date information. And then also just being more informative on the topic, because it really is a pretty new topic, especially with the term toxic masculinity. And I haven't seen it in a lot of scholarly articles, and so I thought it would be really interesting to see what could come up from this new definition. And then here are some of my references, and then here are some more of my references. And I did want to end this off by saying that this study does not necessarily conclude that masculinity as a whole should be regarded as toxic, but that there are certain subsects of masculinity that can be viewed as toxic. And that is exactly what we're wanting to look at. So thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys learned something today.